So thanks to everybody on the Zoom conference tonight, the live stream on our YouTube channel, and everybody that came from Meetup. I saw lots of people from there. And this month, it is a pleasure to introduce you to a new friend of WAS. Dr. Lucy Fortson is a professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Minnesota. As an observational astrophysicist, she uses very high-energy gamma-ray telescopes to study active galactic nuclei. She's also a founding member of the Zooniverse project, where over 2 million volunteers contribute to discovery research by performing simple data analysis tasks across a wide range of disciplines, from astronomy to zoology. And if you've been watching or been a member for a while, you may remember Tabby Boyajian. She was a WAS speaker back in March 2016, and she introduced a lot of us to Zooniverse. And that's where, citizen scientists were working on the Zooniverse Planet Hunters project, and they discovered that odd star that most people ended up calling Tabby's star. So lots of stuff has come out of the Zooniverse, and we love Tabby for coming and talk to us. But back to Dr. Fortson. And prior to joining the faculty at the University of Minnesota, she was vice president for research at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, a great place if you haven't been there before, and a research scientist at the University of Chicago. And she received her BA in 1984 from Smith College in physics and astronomy, and her PhD in 1991 from UCLA in high energy physics on CERN's UA1 experiment. She is a fellow of the American Physical Society and a member of the American Astronomical Society, the Citizen Science Association, and the Association for Computing Machinery. Her awards include the APS Nicholson Medal, NASA's Exceptional Public Service Award, the University of Geneva's Innovation Award, and the University of Minnesota's Community Engaged Scholar Award. Won't you please welcome Dr. Lucy Fortson. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's great that Tabby has already talked to you. In fact, I will show one of her results later.
Yeah, she was great. She's so engaging. So it was great to have her. I think then she was at Yale. Now she's down in Louisiana. So it was nice to have her when we could.
Well, thanks very much, Dan, for the introduction. It's always a little strange to listen to one's history there, and when so focused on the moment that it's like, oh, that's how I got here. Okay. And thank you everybody for dialing in. I wish I could be there in person. I really like to walk around and demonstrate and stuff, so I'm confined to this little Zoom box. So you'll have to imagine me, being Italian at some level. So, what I wanted to do tonight is I wanted to give you a brief overview of the Zooniverse, probably a little bit more than what Tabby gave several years ago. And in particular, I wanted to sort of riff on this idea of mapping a haystack, and how we've just got this huge amount of data and represented by a haystack, and yet we still need to figure out a way to find the needles in the haystack. So I will probably beat that analogy to death in the talk. So have fun chuckling at that. So here we go. So I gotta be able to switch slides here. There we go. Nope, that's not working either. All right, so as promised, here's our haystack. So this is a story about hay at some level. And of course, how many hands can make light work of things like creating haystacks. But more importantly, at some level, it's how we as humans throughout our civilization, we invent machines to make the work that we need to do more efficient so we can eventually tackle even bigger fields. And as we do so, we find that the role between the human and the machine changes. And so the majority of the talk is about this relationship between humans and machines and how that is going to help us solve the issues in big data. All right, so what is big data? So basically, we have a huge amount of data coming in from everywhere, all of our satellites, the Westport Observatory, our medical instruments, all of this stuff now that we link to our cell phones and our Internet of Things. And of course, can you guys see my cursor?
Yes, we can.
Okay, right, good. And so, let's not forget about good old-fashioned pencil and paper. There's a lot of big data there as well. So we've got a huge amount of data already stored, but even more coming in. So what do we do with that data? It's not just for taking the data. We have to analyze the data. And so this data deluge is basically an information explosion, and it's quite difficult for us to keep up with the analysis, the ability to analyze all these data. And so, we refer to this so-called analysis gap. And the gap shows up because not just of the volume, we call the 4 V's of data. It's not just the volume of the data, so this data deluge, but it's the variety. It's we need to treat these data in very different ways to do proper analyses. It's the rapidity at which these data are arriving. And I've added this 4th V, which is incredibly important, need I say, in this day and age, the veracity of data. And so we have, this idea that, machines, computers could certainly help us with this analysis gap, but they really can't solve the whole thing. And so we need to find some way to close this analysis gap. In the last half decade or so, there's been a lot of progress in artificial intelligence, and the hope is that artificial intelligence is going to be able to solve this analysis gap. The issue is, presaging a certain amount of what I'm going to be talking about, is that artificial intelligence is really only as good as the training data that you give it. Okay. So really, it comes down to a fairly simple question. Which is better at spotting the tiger? A computer with some jury-rigged, visual aid, or a child, a 5-year-old child? Well, I think, obviously most of us would say, even at this point, the 5-year-old child has the advantage of having a human brain, which has, over millions of years of evolution, evolved to the point where it is better at analyzing complex images. And so that's sort of one of these aspects of closing the analysis gap, is getting at how to analyze complex images. And so the human brain is not only good at analyzing complex images, it's better at inference, and in particular, it's better at generalizing from small amounts of data than a computer. So effectively, through evolution, we have gotten to the point where we only need a few examples of an image to know what to look out for. In this case, what to not look out for, or what to stay away from. So, all right, the next question is, if we have this idea that humans are really good at complex analysis, can humans actually play a role in closing this analysis gap? And so, one of the big questions is there enough cognitive surplus? Are we still too busy trying to survive? Or, do we have the surplus to be able to help out? So to give you a sense of scale for the answer there, we spend about 128 years integrated over every hour playing games like Candy Crush and Pokemon Go. So I don't know if any of you guys do that, but certainly a lot of our kids do, and our kids grow up, and they continue to want to do these sort of things. So, apparently we got so good at spotting tigers and avoiding danger that we needed to fill that sort of evolutionary itch with something. So what we were hoping at the Zooniverse is that by building something that, maybe tried to help fill that need to do something with one's time, we could siphon off a few of those people who are playing games and have them participate in some of the projects that we have on the site. And so this idea of cognitive surplus, clearly there there's plenty of surplus out there. We see that, as of 2007, when we launched our platform, we've garnered 2.25 million registered volunteers worldwide. And as of last night, we have those volunteers have contributed over 500 million, 500 million classifications. Okay, and so this is just sort of showing how the growth of the Zooniverse has gone over the last decade or more. And so we started with our first project, which was Galaxy Zoo. Many of you might be familiar with that. And since then, we have over 300 projects that have been on the system. And those 300 projects have led to over 200 peer-reviewed papers, which is, of course, the academic coin of the realm. And it's one of the reasons why we are such a popular site is because those volunteers who contribute know that their clicks, their classifications, are actually going to be used by the research teams in furthering science. So one of the reasons why we've been able to have this sort of explosive growth is we realized sort of in 2014 that one of the bottlenecks was our ability to develop these web apps. And we were sort of doing custom web development for any project that wanted something, and that would take like half a year to do. And it just became this huge bottleneck. And so what we found, and I'll show you in a second examples of this, is that many projects, didn't matter what domain they were in, had very similar types of tasks from the perspective of building a web interface. So what we did is we collected all of those tasks, put them in a do-it-yourself project builder interface, and put it out for the research teams or the scientists or anybody, high school classrooms, anybody can build a project. Doesn't matter who you are. If you have data, you can link it up to a project, you can build a project. And of course, there's some work you have to do to actually get it to appear on the Zooniverse site. There's a review process, of course, but nonetheless, the idea is we threw it open, and that you can see has really helped our numbers in terms of the project skyrocket. So this is an image of the projects page where you can just go and you can pick whatever project you want to work on. We have them sort of tabulated by the different domains. If you're interested in history, if you're interested in space science, biology, what have you, you can sort of filter from there. And so, just these are all of the astronomy projects that have been on or still on the platform. Interesting that it sort of fit all into one giant slide. But just to say that right now, only a few of them are, quote, active, meaning that you can click and make contributions to. The majority of them are in the so-called paused state. That means, for example, a couple of them are mine, these gamma ray ones right here. We're waiting for more data. We're actually in the process of analyzing the data we've already received from the crowd. And we don't want to put up any more images until we know what we're doing based on that analysis. So many of the projects are paused, waiting for new data, or in the middle of an analysis. And then some projects are just done. They're like, thank you very much, we've done what we need, and they've published, and that's it. So that sort of, gives you a flavor for the larger aspects of the Zooniverse platform. And now let's take a look at some of the tasks I mentioned that we can sort of use in this project builder. And so one of our most basic tasks is a marking task. And as you can see here, as demonstrated by this project, every project on the Zooniverse has this interface where the task is laid out. In this case, people are counting penguins at the South Pole to track effects of global warming on the penguin populations. It turns out to be one of our most popular projects. Who knew when we launched it that it's like, okay, counting penguins. In any case, one of the other things that you can see is that we have information in the About page here. We have a talk page. Later in the talk, I will say why this talk page or discussion board is so important. And we have collections of images associated with this project that the volunteers have collected together to, for whatever reason, they might want to talk about them. So that is sort of the general outline of what a basic project looks like. Again, this is an example of a marking task. And of course, we reuse the tools within the project builder. This is another marking task. This one is the planet hunters, which Dan referred to, where Tabby's star was discovered. And so this is looking for dips and light curves, ostensibly to be able to identify candidates of exoplanets, planets outside our solar system. And in the meantime, other sorts of identifications can be made, classes of variable stars, these sorts of things. But Tabby's star is just one of many stars that have actually been discovered by the volunteers working on this platform, which is it's pretty cool, right? To have a planet named after you. Well, not named after you, but you're part of that process. So another type of task that we have is a drawing task. This is an example of one of our biology projects. Here, the idea is there are thousands of electron microscopy images that if you were to stack them together in 3D, you would be able to reconstruct the morphology of a cell. And in this particular case, the researchers are quite interested in how the nuclear envelope, which is what you see being traced out, changes as a function of disease. So the morphology of the nuclear envelope is going to be different if it's been invaded by a virus and strange things or horrible things happen. The membrane of the nuclear envelope explodes and gross stuff happens. So they want to investigate that. And if, believe it or not, it's really only with these advances in the last sort of half decade of electron microscopy and the ability for the crowd to come in and help draw these outlines, something a machine really can't do very well, that we've actually really been able to make headway in this kind of research. And then this is an example of our survey task. This one is typically used for a very large number of camera trap projects that we have. This one happens to be from one of our first camera trap projects where there's 250 cameras set out in a grid in the Serengeti. And the idea is to collect the images where about 2/3 of the images are actually just false triggers on the camera. The cameras are heat and motion sensitive. And so you just have a little blade of grass floating in the wind, and it will just continuously trigger the camera. And it's, one of the problems when we first started this was to actually get rid of all of those, what we call blank images, in images where there aren't any actual animals. But once you do have an animal show up in your image, then you have to classify what it is. And so this is an example of our survey task. And we can use the survey task in other domains like astronomy, and I'll have an example later on how we do that. Then, of course, as I alluded to, we have all of human history that needs transcription so that we can do better, digital curation. We can do searching and research on all of human history in a much more organized fashion. And so we have a large number of transcription projects in multiple languages and even in multiple alphabets on our site. Okay, so that's a hopefully brief tour of how the different types of tasks you can do, the different domains that Zooniverse works with. So now let's look a little bit under the hood and see how the Zooniverse works. What do we do when we get a classification? And so the basic idea is we get, there's an image that is presented in one of these interfaces. The volunteer is instructed with a tutorial on how to classify that image. They start that process, and for every image, there is, in those tasks, that task is recorded through the web interface and bundled up and sent through, we can talk about the data model later if people have questions about it, but effectively what then the research team does is pulls the data off of the Zooniverse website and analyzes it. So what are they doing? So the idea then is that more than one person, this is sort of the critical point of how the Zooniverse works. So if you only had one volunteer looking at each image, well, it sort of depend on how that volunteer did. You wouldn't have any necessary confidence that the volunteer got the correct label or the correct classification for that, particular image. You just wouldn't know either way. So the idea sort of, there's this concept, the wisdom of the crowds, or more mathematically speaking, something known as the central limit theorem, which sort of says that if you have multiple independent guesses or values drawn, then they will trend towards the mean. Or towards the correct value, or at least the mean value. You can argue with me that the mean value may not always necessarily be the correct value, but that's, that's for an argument later. The bottom line is, for all intents and purposes, for what we're really looking for from the Zooniverse volunteers, is that they participate as multiple independent classifiers. They vote, and we aggregate their votes. And that aggregation process, which is software on the Zooniverse, produces a consensus answer. And then the research team takes all those consensus answers and moves forward with the research that they needed to do. So that's sort of just a brief overview of how the Zooniverse works. And so, we can see that it's really this idea of, we've got this huge haystack of data, we can access it with the Zooniverse, and we can crowdsource the work, and say that many hands do make light work, or in this case, many brains do make light work. All right, so Zooniverse has been up and running, it's kind of scary. 14, maybe close to 15 years now, which is just a scary thought, but there we are. So it worked incredibly well for the size of the data sets that we had in the late 2000s and early 2010s. we're now, the velocity or the volume, the 4 V's of the data deluge just continue to ramp up. And so we need help. And so we're at that stage in the evolution of our work where we really have to think about bringing the machines in. And so, again, sort of hammering home this point that I was just making, when we launched the Zooniverse, we only had 1 million galaxies from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which is what you're seeing here as part of a clip of a fly-through of the Sloan universe, so to speak, some of the nearest galaxies to us. And these are showing the different types of galaxies, morphologies. You all will know this quite well, of course, that galaxies come, if you will, in basically 2 types, disks or spirals versus ellipticals. And the basic idea in needing to classify the morphologies is that to better understand galaxy evolution, we need to know what their morphologies are, because we believe that there is a link between the 2. And so we had the task at the time of needing to classify 1 million galaxies. That's that seemed pretty big at the time. And so, we built this interface, the original Galaxy Zoo interface, and it went incredibly well. And, just again, a testament to how well this first project went. There are 60 science papers using the data just from this first project and just from the Galaxy Zoo team. So it's been an incredibly productive data set that the volunteers put together for us. But where are we going? So that was then, where we had 20 terabytes of data taken over 10 years, which turned out to be about 1 million galaxies imaged. And we are in, hopefully within the year, about to see the Vera Rubin, AKA LSST observatory come online. And the projections for that observatory is 15 terabytes of data per night. So 20 billion galaxies imaged. And so therefore, it wouldn't matter how many people you had, just this idea that you could have citizen scientists, classify the morphologies, never mind any of the other projects. 20 billion galaxies imaged is almost preposterous. So we really do need to think about combining humans and machines. And so for the rest of the presentation, I'll sort of focus in on that. And so this was definitely something that, we knew was coming, right? We knew, of course, with all the plans for LSST and, the large amounts of data that were coming in and the acceleration of the data coming in, that this was a problem that we were going to have to tackle. So one of our graduate students here at the University of Minnesota devised a machine learning mechanism, algorithm, and she reran the Galaxy Zoo project with that machine learning algorithm hooked up. And she was able to reproduce the data that the volunteers provided over a year period. It took about a year for that whole set to be classified. She was able to reproduce it in about a month. And so quite complex combination of machine intelligence and human intelligence, but it sort of gave us a roadmap of where to go. And the gist is that what you want to try to do is have the humans start first by looking at the first sets of images that are coming off of a of a platform like, the Rubin telescope. They get going first. As we said earlier, humans are much faster at knowing what to do after only a few example images, whereas machines need a lot of example images to be well trained. And so you start with the humans, they classify a few of them, and as they're classifying, the machine is listening. And they're continuously pulling in the answers, if you will, from the humans, and continuously training up. And the machine is evaluating itself. And once it reaches a learning threshold, then the machine feels it is well trained enough and can be released on the entire set of data coming in. And so the machines then kind of accelerate, taking over from what the humans started with. And there's another half of that story, which I'm going to save for a little bit later. So we're going to finish talking about the machine intelligence side of this, and then we'll wrap back to the human intelligence side of this and why we can't just turn it over to the machines. Okay, so another thing we learned to do, not just to train machine algorithms to help us, but to get on, social media, basically, to make an app, so there's an app for that. Now, it turns out that not all of our projects are suited for the small real estate of a phone. Some of our drawing tasks don't work very well on the phone. But if you, so to speak, tenderize something where you really just need a human to validate what the machine thinks, then it goes quite fast. And it's just a swipe left or swipe right. Is this a spiral galaxy or not? And we found the response rate is incredible, as you might expect. Back when you did things like standing in line at Starbucks or, for the bus or what have you, we saw a 50% acceleration in the rate of classifications with projects that were on our Zooniverse app. So great. So we've found a way to accelerate the classification process. And that's great because we really need that to help train the machines. And so, the first Galaxy Zoo project, the one that our graduate student Melanie Beck used to train machines, turns out she wasn't the only one. There were, this was sort of what people were doing at that time, 5 or 6 years ago, and really pushing on how to make machines useful. Machine algorithm, and in particular, what's known as deep learning, or some people call it artificial intelligence or convolutional neural nets, these terms that people throw around, really only started coming into its own in the last half decade with some advances that were made in that area. And so what we found is people were actually using our set of, 1 million labels labeled by our, independent classifiers as the ground truth labels to train their machines. So this is just a literature search that links the search term Galaxy Zoo with machine learning, and there were a large number of projects that used our data for training their machines. Again, just emphasizing how the tide was shifting to the need to harness machines to be able to help with the data deluge. And so one of those papers, actually just kind of played a trick. And as I've said multiple times now, the point is that machines need a lot of data to train them correctly. And so it's not that this person, Shandor Dilleman, had anything really clever to implement on the machine learning side. All he did is say, well, galaxies, they're in space. There's no up or down or right or left. So I can crop the images, I can rotate them, I can chop them up, and I can increase my training data set by a factor of 8. And that was enough for him to actually enter into this contest. Is something called a Kaggle contest, which a lot of people in the machine learning world participate in. There's like, prizes, $10,000. Hey, you guys should harness somebody out there and get them to enter a Kaggle competition so that you can pay for your, observatory, refurbishment. But anyways, so there are, sizable chunks of change in these competitions. This guy won just by realizing that all he needed to do was augment his data set. And again, underscoring the point, machines require large sets of training data to train them correctly. So it's not just astronomy. Camera traps, as I mentioned earlier, is a huge growth area for us. There's a lot of emphasis on being able to monitor particular endangered species for biodiversity and particular impacts on climate change, or impacts on biodiversity by climate change. So this, the Serengeti project was the first project to launch in 2012. 7 million images, okay, more than the Galaxy Zoo first project, 7 million images. We now have, I haven't updated this, but it's, just the number of camera trap projects just grows exponentially. Literally, hunters in Wisconsin have convinced the Department of Natural Resources in Wisconsin that, camera traps on Zooniverse is a good idea. So, great. So there is, the Canadian government has, it uses Zooniverse to set up camera traps. Well, they set up camera traps to monitor how, where wildlife might want to cross a national highway. So to prevent a roadkill, and where to put these either, wildlife crossing bridges or tunnels and those sorts of things. So there's a huge growth in these camera trap projects. So it's not just the astronomy projects that need the help of machine learning. We need also to deploy artificial intelligence on things like these ecology projects as well. Right. So the good news is, man, do we have a lot of data, and we have nearly 2.5 million volunteers, and they've been very busy over the last few years. Nearly 500 million classifications. There's got to be good for something, right? They really have been generating training sets for those machines, and that's really been working very very well. So why does the story not just stop here? Well, of course, there is something else in that haystack of huge data, and that is the needle. So with the first Galaxy Zoo project, we only had a million galaxies, but we had, hundreds of thousands of people looking. So it didn't actually take very much for at least one person. In fact, we had on that project 40 people on average look at every single image. So if you have every single image going by some human eyeballs, the likelihood of them being able to pick out a needle grows. And we'll get more to about that in a second. Right, so how good are machines at picking out needles in a haystack? So are any of you gonna get into a self-driving car when they first come out? I'm not gonna get into a self-driving car Not anytime soon. I know too much about how, the algorithms are trained. And sadly, of course, we've had many examples of where, self-driving cars, have ended in death or injury. So I would say we're not really ready, and that's because the machines aren't ready. And that's because the machines have problems with their training. And on Zooniverse, we call this the Zorilla Problem. So here we have, again, some example, fantastic images. And by the way, if you do the wildlife projects, you really are treated to some amazing images, really, especially like in COVID when you can't go on safari. Maybe you couldn't go on safari anyways, but you really get treated to wildlife images. Anyways, so these are some of the more typical images that you might find with animals in them of the first million images that were put up on the snapshot Serengeti project. So, if we were doing this, if I were in the physical space, I would get everybody to vote, see if, anybody out there knew what a Zorilla was. And, but since we're not, I'll just sort of leave it at, it's not a cross between a zebra and a gorilla. It's more a cross between a zebra and a skunk. And out of that first million images that were put up on the snapshot Serengeti, only 10 Zorillas showed up. They're just rare. And so the problem for machines is they don't train well out of sample. So if you don't give them enough images, they don't know what to say about something when you put a Zorilla in front of them. They might think this is a zebra far away. So a machine might classify this incorrectly, obviously, as a zebra. So the confidence scores of machines go way down for objects that are rare. And of course, objects that you don't know about at all are very difficult to train a machine for. So, the question is, can machines be trained to detect even obvious needles in the haystack, like, our friend, the polar bear? Of course, this is a completely fake picture for a whole host of reasons, mostly because if we had polar bears in Antarctica or penguins in the Arctic, things would, we would be in serious trouble. So again, I underscore this point that machines don't generalize very well out of sample. They can only do well with the training they've been given. But this is exactly the problem that humans are good at from all of that evolution that we've gone through, and our ability to identify complexity in images and make inference and generalize. So that is what we're good for. Another difference between machines and humans is I submit, have a different motivation than machines. Machines just do what they're told at some level. And that's the brilliant thing about machines, but it's also their failing. For humans, we have to take into account their motivations. And fortunately for Zooniverse, one of the first things we did out of the gate with Galaxy Zoo way back in 2008 is we ran a survey to find out whether it was even worth trying to launch a platform that could serve different domains or multiple astronomy projects. How do we know that people hadn't just been assigned by their astronomy teachers, or they just liked looking at beautiful images of galaxies? And we were floored that the most common motivation was that people wanted to contribute to research. They literally wanted to do something other than Candy Crush. whatever the equivalent game was back in 2008. So, so that's certainly one way we're different from machines. And another interesting thing that, again, I will emphasize is the ability for us to learn from very few images. And this is an example of the same set of images, the top row. So we have on the left, of course, a spiral galaxy, and on the right, something closer to an elliptical, but maybe you could see some spiral arms in there. But these images were given to volunteer, well, one row was given to a volunteer non-expert, and one row was given to an expert classifier, an expert, actually an astronomer. And so the red dots are, so the people who did this were hooked up to eye tracking software. And so the red dots are these sort of dwell times where, the eye tracking software, repeats how you looked at the image. And this, of course, is very, it's obviously used a lot for, unfortunately, like advertising on the internet and stuff like that. But here, what we're trying to do is see what is the initial response. How fast do people classify these galaxies, and what kinds of information are they looking for on these images to make their classification determinations? Again, if we were together, I would get you to vote on which one you thought was the expert and which one you thought was the volunteer. And it turns out that, and you can like pat yourself on the shoulder if you guessed right, but it turns out the top row is the non-expert classifier and the bottom row is the expert classifier. And what you can see is that the non-expert doesn't have context. This may have been the first galaxy image they've ever seen in their life, probably not, but so they're looking across the whole image for context, for the field. They need to position this image in some larger context. It's a bit hard to see on the screen, but the path that they take kind of wanders a little bit. Whereas the expert, bang, right in there, traces out the spiral arms. They know their task is supposed to decide whether this is a spiral or elliptical galaxy. Right in there, tracing those spiral arms. No, doesn't need any information for context. Right there. The elliptical is a little bit more interesting. So you've got, again, the non-expert is again sort of tracing around, getting, of course, goes to the bright spot in the center, etc. Here, you don't have, the expert has made the decision instantly with the caveat that they are exploring some of these fainter potential tidal tail features there. All of this is to say, there are expert blind spots. So actually, we prefer to have non-expert classifiers on the system. Why? Okay, we don't chuck experts out, but the reason why we like non-experts will unfold in the following story. All right, so again, this is the Galaxy Zoo original interface. Through the talk forum, you can post strange things. And again, if you are a non-expert, you're looking around the entire field, or you're looking at things, you ask the question why or what. And this is, again, something that humans do that machines don't. And so it's very hard to see in this post, but there's a tiny little green object there, which this person posted and started the chain, give peas a chance, because she called it a green pea. So humans can search for explanations. Once that green pea was found and posted on the talk boards, there was something else that we had done at the beginning of Galaxy Zoo, and that is to link each individual image to an intermediary interface that was run by the Sloan Digital Sky Survey that had a lot of metadata. So what did these volunteers do? They started collecting Ps, they started going to this website for each one, started looking at their spectra, noticing things about the spectra, that there's a very high amount of O3, oxygen 3, in the spectra typically, and started putting together criteria for what a green pea was supposed to be. And that those criteria made it onto the talk boards, and after some time, they had generated several hundred examples of these so-called green peas. Meanwhile, they had been trying to get the attention of the astronomers, to no avail. The astronomers on Galaxy Zoo, we were busy with a whole bunch of other things. It just, you know, we didn't pay attention. And so we left it, interestingly, to the volunteers to do a lot of the legwork in building up the sample of the green peas. This has turned out to be one of the, in fact, one of the main poster children, if you will, of how, you know, these volunteer non-experts can really drive discovery on the Zooniverse platform. And in fact, Galaxy Zoo green peas are an entire new class of galaxies that are very high, have, you know, very high star formation rates, very low mass galaxies. And the idea is we think they are analogs to what galaxies were at the towards the beginning of the universe. And so they're quite interesting. They're local analogs for that. And so since 2007, over 330 papers have been published in the astronomy community, and most of them talk about green peas. Well, no astronomer would have named something a green pea, but there we are. So we have the imprint of the volunteers' work. Now is this sort of cottage industry in astronomy. I'm starting to run a little bit long on time here. I was, you know, wanted to give another example. It turns out this volunteer, Hanny, was prolific in finding interesting objects. So she found something that she dubbed Hanny's voorwerp. Turns out she's a Dutch school teacher. Voorwerp just translates to thing, or thingy, or object in English. And so yes, she saw this in the image. In the original image, you had to look a little hard to see it, but she saw, you know, this, you know, alien looking thing, and, you know, wanted to know what that was. And in this case, the astronomers picked up on it pretty quickly. Actually got some time on the Hubble Space Telescope. Hanny was a part of that proposal on the Space Telescope. She was, you know, telling her school kids about this exciting stuff that was going on. A comic book was made about Hanny and her adventures with the Hubble Space Telescope. In the end, this mystery object turns out to be something that had been theorized, but not really ever detected before. And that is a so-called light echo of a quasar that had turned off. So a quasar is sort of emitting material from the center of the galaxy. Probably most of you know what a quasar is, but in any case, there's, you know, ionizing radiation that's being emitted. And in this particular case, the ionization, of course, takes time for it to dissipate. And here what happened is there was a merging event pulling a tidal tail out of the main galaxy that hosts Hanny's voorwerp. So you have this tidal tail. You have the original quasar emitting ionizing radiation and causing this glow. It turns out green glow in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey filters, again, an O3 emission, and that's what you saw. What you don't see is the quasar still emitting. And so what this allowed us to do is estimate the time at which the quasar turned off its emission. So the central engine of that quasar turned off, and it's something we thought quasars did, but never caught in the act. So we believe that this quasar turned off 40,000 years ago, effectively before Halley's Vorwerp was detected as the light echo of the quasar. And so that again spawned another cottage industry going out and finding more examples once we kind of knew what to look for. And, you know, they're just some brilliant examples. And then there's another whole subtext to the volunteers that were enlisted they built their own interface to go through the Galaxy Zoo data and find more of these examples. Okay, so this is a bit of an old slide. I need to update it, but just to say there are quite a number of just in astronomy discoveries that have been made by citizen scientists where they have been co-authors. This is, the Boyagen Tabby star there. And so, great. So just, you know, to start bringing this home, the key is machines are great at brute force, but they don't train well out of sample. They don't know how to distinguish rare or unknown objects. And so we have to figure out a way to combine humans and machines. So, you know, that has been the task for us on Zooniverse in pretty much the last sort of half decade, is to move into that arena. And this kind of gives you the loop as what we're trying to accomplish here. And so we get images off of the LSST, big data. We combine the machine classifiers and the citizen scientists together in the manner that I was telling you about earlier with our student Melanie Beck's paper, where the humans are training up first. They pass off the data to the machines get trained up, but the machines then are passing data back to the citizen scientists because they need to be checked to make sure that their algorithms are still doing what they need to be doing. And there's one thing we haven't solved, which is how to get all eyeballs on an image so that, or all images having an eyeball on them so that we detect these great things like Halley's Vorwerp or the green peas. So one of the things we're working on now is how to combine citizen scientists and machines to do that step. And I will gloss over that. People ask me that in the question session, but just suffice it to say, we've been developing pretty complex machine algorithms to do that. Also, finding ways to kind of gamify the projects. This is our gravitational wave detection project using LIGO data, where we've been able to leverage both the machine and the human intelligences to discover types of what are called glitches or artifacts that can masquerade as gravitational wave detections it's very important for the LIGO system to be able to know about these. And so when we have a system that combines humans and machines, we need to take into account the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, that it's the human engagement that is critical to the science outcomes. We need to be in there engaging people on the talk forums and other mechanisms, and know that humans are complex. If we have machines and humans working together, is that going to turn some of our volunteers off? Are they going to leave because they think that machines are going to do everything? And, you know, this is an interesting topic to talk about, not just for Zooniverse, but in general as work moves towards, you know, augmenting with artificial intelligence. So I am going to leave it at that and just say that we have multiple pathways to deeper engagement that include you know, such things as identification of animals that the volunteers get really clever about. And so our question that we're trying to answer now is, what's the best way to bring all of the information that the humans have and are able to give, and the brute force method that the machines enable, how can we combine those to get the best outcome for Zooniverse? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your attention. And of course, as always, thanks to all of our volunteers. I'm hoping that some of you have been volunteers or will be volunteers. And of course, you always have to put up your funding. So thanks to everybody who's given funding for us. And then I'm gonna just pause on this image, which is one of the Serengeti, snapshot Serengeti animal IDs of a cheetah made out of pixels of galaxies from Galaxy Zoo. So there we go. We are indeed star stuff.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Until we come out with the Bob Meadows Cyborg 2.0, I think it's going to be us just mashing some buttons here. I wanted to ask you too, because years ago, I was one of the first people when SETI at Home came out.
Oh, right, yeah.
I really was into that, and I had it running on tons of computers. I had it running on cell phones, and and it finally. Then it was folded into a service called Boink, which also hosted Folding at Home, Einstein at Home, and different tons of things. And then SETI at Home went away. It's done. At least that version of it is. Is this something that would work with Boink? Is this something that once you have all these things identified, or at least enough, can you turn Boink or something like that loose on this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is definitely something that we have talked about in certain ways. So there are sort of two missing ends to the pipeline, if you will. One of them is what you've said, which is unleashing the machines, or in the case that you're referring to, all the extra cycles that we have. The other end of and so yes. The short answer to your question is that's definitely, in particular with the gravitational wave project, that's something they're looking at, because they have something called Einstein at Home, which uses Boink. So one of the ideas is to move towards, once we've got labels and we've got an algorithm up, moving that off to Boink. The other side of the pipeline is data collection. So, going back to this very early discussion we were having in the beginning about astrophotography, there's so many images out there. Now, of course, there's the AAVSO, which collects, images to look for, variable star changes over time. But imagine if you had a collection of images that you were able to sort of sift through of the same object. And, there may be scaling issues, there may be a whole slew of things that you need to do. But if you were to look for, interesting changes, there's something you can do there as well. So astronomy is a little bit more difficult with that, but on things like our ecology projects, where you're out in the woods, you see a rare bird or something else, then you want to be able to upload those images and have them go straight into like a Zooniverse project. Yeah, so there's two ends of that pipeline: getting humans to do the distributed data collection, and then getting the humans to do the labeling, which is the Zooniverse intermediary, and then getting the machines, hopefully getting the humans to allow their machines to help with the machine learning side.
And there's still an app. There's still a Zooniverse app. I haven't looked for it yet. I was just going to go.
Oh, yeah.
There's still something for the phone?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of projects already on, yeah, for sure. I keep railing my fist at the people who put our front page together, but it's not very well advertised on the Zooniverse front page. And if you log in, You don't go to the Zooniverse front page. You go to your front page, and the app isn't there. I've been, anyways, out of my control. There's like 30 people now who work on Zooniverse, so, you know.
I saw this isn't really a question that came in from YouTube. It's kind of just more of it's another like distributed type of looking. But Space TV, who is in actually Liverpool, UK tonight. So welcome, Space TV. Had mentioned that they used to dink around with a game called EVE Online. And there was a mini game built into it where it had a project discovery where it actually you could actually find real exoplanets. I didn't know about that. I remember playing EVE Online years ago, but I never heard about that. That's amazing too.
Yep, that's fun because you mentioned the University of Geneva Innovation Award. That was shared with the people who developed that EVE online citizen science planet hunting project. Yeah, exactly. And so those guys at the University of Geneva are still looking for ways to do it. There's some, I mean, the problem is, in games like that, there was some success, but people are focused on gameplay. And maybe they just want to sort of compartmentalize what they're doing. And so I think what needs to be done there is to make it much more part of a role or something that is very critical on a critical path for the gameplay. In this particular case, it was not critical path. I forget exactly, I forget exactly what you got, but you got some score added somewhere, which you could use eventually, but it wasn't critical path. So I don't think it was as successful as it could have been.
Interesting.
I hope that helps answer their question.
Yeah. It wasn't really, it was a statement. So yeah, you filled in the blanks on that pretty well. One of our members, Doug, had said, he put in the Q&A here that he goes, I've been working in AI since the 60s. He goes, I rather thought we'd surpassed the brute force approach for decades now. So we're just going to take this and just pound it with a hammer? Is that the best way?
The brute force from the humans or the machines?
Well, I think that he meant the brute force from the machines, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you want to expand on that, Doug, but.
Yeah, I mean, in either case, answering either case, it's really that combination of the two that we're working on right now to move away from brute force. And so as I was trying to tell the story of Melanie Beck's paper, where, the idea is you set up this combination where the humans get trained up first, then they are training the machine. This particular paper here, which interestingly, a second paper literally just was accepted today, is using some more sophisticated machine algorithms called active learning. And the idea is the machine, it goes back to this point of machines don't know what they don't know. They're not trained with something, they don't know that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to try to tease out of them. So you don't want them spending time classifying in a brute force way the easy stuff. You want the machines to be focusing on the, learning how to do the hard stuff. So in terms of their training. So you don't want to just keep giving them easy examples, just like humans. You want to ratchet it up. You want to challenge the machines a bit, right? And so this active learning kind of does that. So the machine says in this active learning loop, okay, I've gotten pretty good at this classification problem. But now there's ways, we can have an at-length discussion about how you do this, but there are ways to develop an algorithm that allows the machine to know what it's not good at. So it knows that it can classify X over here very well. So it says, I'm ignoring that. I need to get information from the humans on Y, on this other object. So it knows to only serve up to the volunteers the stuff it knows the least about. And so that is what we've been doing with Galaxy Zoo now. So with Galaxy Zoo, with this active learning program, running, the humans, the volunteers will see less of the easy stuff because the machine's got that done, and they'll see more of the hard stuff. And the more of that hard stuff is then helping the machine to learn faster. So the whole package is, getting away from this brute force and moving more to much more sophisticated combinations between the humans and the machines. I hope that answered his question.
Yeah, he was looking for, about the machine, so you did answer that. And any other questions? We didn't have a lot of them come in tonight. I'm surprised. I thought it would be a few more. But Cal, did you have one?
I've got a few comments. One is that the National Air and Space Museum used to have Galaxy Zoo on a kiosk, so that a lot of the visitors would just poke around with it to see what it was like. Now, of course, they are redoing the entire museum, and so I don't know what's going to occur when it reopens again. But in any case, I thought that was interesting. I also recognized one of the names on one of the surveys that you did, in that we had at Northern Virginia Astronomy Club a presentation from Kirk Bourne, who is at George Mason University, and who was making the case for you better study up on big data, because that's where a lot of the future is going to be. So a terrific talk. Thanks very much.
Kirk was one of the very original people that we worked with once we realized, we knew early on, and even in 2007, that we needed to get on the machine learning bandwagon. And Kirk was definitely somebody we reached out to at that time. And so he got us our training wheels, set, and then he went off to do bigger and better things. So yeah.
Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I think that this is probably as good a time as any to stick a fork in it. Dr. Fortson, that was great. I learned so much about the Zooniverse tonight. I mean, when Tabby was here before, she only talked about tests. I mean, that was her focus. She didn't talk about anything else. I mean, so I'm glad that you gave us much more of an overview of everything that the Zooniverse is. It really is an all-encompassing, never-ending fire hose of data.
It is, and in as much as anybody hopefully has been inspired to participate tonight, we of course wouldn't be anywhere without all of the volunteer contributions. So again,
we're the same way.
Yeah.
We are exactly the same way. And please, that's a good segue to remind you that on February 25th, we are raising money to try and clean up that tower and the dome. And you'll be getting plenty of emails about it. Go to the website, our website. It'll give you everything that you need to know about it on there. And so with that, let's put a bow on this and wrap it on up.
Right.
Dr. Fortson, thank you so much. We'll do this again, I hope soon. And we'll talk to you all next month.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hey.
Bye.